Well, thank you very much for giving me the chance just to say a few words on behalf of the trustees in support of the new strategic framework. There's no point in me telling you about it because you already know much more than I do, but I just want to add a little contribution on each of those areas of change and partnership and Catholic identity. First of all, change. There was a man who went to work one Monday morning in the factory. Lunchtime came. He unwrapped his sandwiches and he said, "Oh, cheese sandwiches." Next day he went in, unwrapped the sandwiches again. He said, "Oh, it's cheese sandwiches again." And then the third day he said, "It's those damn cheese sandwiches." And somebody said to him, "Look, why don't you ask your wife to make other sorts of sandwiches?" And he said, "Because I make them myself." We live in a society which can be very fatalistic, which doesn't actually believe that things can change. We've been ruled by the fatalism of the market for the last few years. You know, leave it all to the invisible hand of the market and wealth will trickle down. And what we've seen in this present economic crisis is that this doesn't work. And so nations have had to intervene in a big way, propping up banks. A friend of mine, Joseph, who's the head of a German Catholic agency called Misereor, asked Angela Merkel recently, he said, "Well, why did you have that incredible intervention when there was a banking crisis?" And she said, "Well, it was an emergency." And Joseph said, "Well, isn't it an emergency when 22,000 people die of starvation every day? Isn't that an emergency?" But often faced, I think, with malnutrition and injustice, we tend to be fatalistic as a culture and think that nothing can be done. One of the reasons that I love CAFOD is because it shows me that change can happen. And it does happen. When I was asked 9 years ago to join the board, I thought board would just about sum it up. But I actually look forward, believe it or not, Chris, I actually look forward to coming to these meetings. Because what I see is an organisation that is changing things. Just to take just two little examples out of hundreds. If you think of Eritrea, one of the most destitute countries in the world, even the government recognises that CAFOD, because of our contact with the local Catholic Church there, we are able to get things to people. And so, as you probably know, 3 or 4 weeks ago, we were approached by DFID and given £2.5 million so that we could have a programme of nourishment for 20,000 malnourished kids. Or in the last Parliament, right at the end, we published the bribery bill, which will be extremely important in tackling corruption. Corruption is now one of the great economic systems of our world. And so we've been able to take a step forward. So, change can happen. And for me, I have to say that as a Christian, that change points me to my hope for humanity. I believe that we are not created to be frustrated, that we will attain that just world, that happy world for which we were made. Martin Luther King said, "I have a dream where all God's children, black and whites, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old spiritual, 'Free at last, free at last. Thanks be to God Almighty, we're free at last.'" And for me, working with CAFOD, I'm nourished in that hope for change. Now, David mentioned, interestingly enough, that what was extraordinary about our relationship with Eritrea and why they wished to be in contact with CAFOD was because the stress we put on partnership. Partnership with Caritas in Eritrea in that case. And it's interesting, you know, that the word partnership comes from the idea that we are part of other people. You must know from your own lives, from your own relationships with the people that you love, that you are part of them, and that they're part of you. And when we react, whether it's to emergencies or long-term programs, when CAFOD acts through partnership, it's because we realize that we are a part of these people, and they're part of us. When we reacted very rapidly in Haiti, for example, or in response to the tsunami, it wasn't just that they needed our help, it's that we need them, because they're part of our identity. I had a little experience that really opened my eyes to this about more than 20 years ago when I went to Kingston, Jamaica. And my brethren took me to a rubbish dump. And on the top of the dump, a number of people were living. And there was a box, which is about the size, I suppose, of that table there. And a woman appeared out of it with her son. And they invited me in. They invited me to have a drink with them. And I remember the kid wanted to swap t-shirts with me. I treasured that t-shirt for years. It seems to have shrunk mysteriously. I don't seem to be able to get into it these days. But I think what I discovered in that moment, and what so many of us find when we go to other places and meet our partners, is that here were my brothers and sisters, and that I'm incomplete without them. And finally, the new strategic framework stresses very strongly the Catholic identity of CAFOD, that we're profoundly linked with the Catholic Church in this country, and also to Caritas International with every part of the church throughout the world. Now, I know that quite a few of you aren't Catholics, and it would be terrible if you were to think that that meant that you were in some way second-class citizens. This is not so. To be a Catholic isn't to have a closed identity, you know, like being a supporter of the English football team. Catholic means katholon, universal. So to be a Catholic is automatically, necessarily, to be open to people beyond our community, and to need them, and to treasure them, and to learn from them. So if any of you, and I think quite a few of you, aren't Catholics, we need you very strongly. And you have a role to play in our community, which is absolutely essential, and for which we're deeply grateful. Now, Hubert Humphrey, you know, who used to be Vice President of the United States, was very proud of his oratory. He used to go on and on. And one day his wife said to him just before a speech, "Now, Hubert, just because your words are immortal, it doesn't mean that they have to go on forever." So I stop now. Thank you very much indeed.